The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here's Brandon.
Time again for another week of the Brandon Peters Show. Thank you for listening. As always, today's episode features a discussion of 1980s fantasy spectacle Hawk: The Slayer. It also features our guest returning for a record-setting third time on the show. It's their first year, so that's early. 3 is, yeah. From the Saturday Evening Post, Troy Brownfield. That's you, Troy. You can come on and say hello.
How's it going?
Hello. All right. So welcome, Troy. I realize that while it's your third time on the show, it's your first time on like an episode proper. Like you were on the Back to the Future one, where that was a roundtable episode, and something I haven't done since. I've done roundtable, but not like that one. And then you were on the holiday gift guide for figurines and stuff. So you haven't been on a typical episode, but you've done a music video episode though. So that's something. But let's talk about you. And you have, not only do you and I have a lot of similar interests and things like that, but I really like you have a varied career in the field of writing. Like, not like it's not like all over the place.
Yeah, that's one way.
But you've been fiction, nonfiction, writing articles, doing comic books, novel, like crazy stuff. But was that always like from where in your start you're like, I went to write stuff, or where did that first hit you and you trying to make a thing of it?
Well, that's a good question. Thanks again for having me on. I've always been interested in writing in one way or another, but I didn't really kind of settle on that until kind of my freshman year in college. I had decided to do kind of a law track. And as that, I decided to be an English major. It was where my interest was and everything. You have all these different, you could have a pre-law major, but it kind of puts you in a box. So I wanted something that was a little wider. But pretty quickly in that freshman year, I thought, not so much on the legal stuff. And it was in that time that I really started focusing more in the other way. And, my degree was in English with radio, TV, film minor. And then I did a master's in creative writing. And my whole path was just to work in publishing and so on. When I got into comics, it was through the comics journalism path. In a weird sort of way, I started out kind of being just happy to write about pop culture stuff. I didn't know I was actually going to be able to get to do it. and then, you just more of those opportunities either open up or you find the space in which you can create that kind of opportunity to happen. So I really, in the 2000s, started doing comics online and then actually getting stuff published with companies, which again opened up more of those opportunities for fiction and whatnot. So that was kind of the path that it went.
Gotcha. And you started, was Shotgun Reviews your first thing of your own? Or?
That was my first website. I had been in college. I was an entertainment editor for the college paper and a columnist and so forth. And a friend of mine started a site in 98 that was called the comickingdom.com. And it was going to be doing some articles and maybe making some comics. And so I started writing some articles for him. And my original Shotgun Reviews column was there. And it was called that just because it covered a wide area. I talk about different parts of pop culture. And as that got rolling, I thought, I had a lot of ideas for other columns and stuff, but it didn't really fit into what Nick was doing. So I started the Shotgun site and had a bunch of people come in, and we were doing wrestling and live music and, CD reviews and movies and all this kind of stuff. And I did a lot of comics, and that put me um, in the view of people that could publish me elsewhere, like the Indianapolis Star and Nouveau News Weekly in Indianapolis. And as I did more on comics and started interviewing comic folk, it put me in the path of Newsarama and Comic-Con.com. And so I started Comic-Con.com. I started writing for them, and then Newsarama picked me up in 2004, and I wrote for them for 7 years. And yeah, that really expanded the scope. That gets you to meet all kinds of people, and you're regularly talking to people from all companies. And sometimes you make the kind of friendships where someone says, "Hey, have you ever considered writing comics?" And to which you say, "Yeah." Because I had actually hit the point where I thought it wouldn't happen for me. It was one of those things you think that maybe that's something that someone gets into in their early 20s or
Right.
they look into. And then when I started doing it, I had a lot of it come my way in a short period of time, and I still have stuff that I'm doing. It might not be as visible as it was at one point, but I have some things that are hilariously visible in like Brazil as opposed to
all right
the States. But actually I can't talk about it in full yet, but the House 137 / All Geek Comics guys that I've done a lot of writing for in Brazil have they've been putting some stuff out with a couple of American places, and I'm going to be working on a crossover between one of the Brazilian characters and one of the American characters.
Oh, nice.
Up here real fast. So that'll be interesting when that happens, and that'll probably facilitate a few more projects like that.
So we're gonna go. This podcast is gonna go viral with you breaking the news in Brazil, just in Brazil.
Yeah, we got to figure out a Portuguese filter real quick.
There we go. Yeah.
Like I can say no in Portuguese because it is no.
Exactly.
We have to cover this up. That's fine.
No, it's fine. No one cares. Not enough people listen or watch too.
It just disappeared because I had it over.
Although I should be sponsored by Sparkling Ice because I am drinking these constantly.
I've got some over there. Let me.
Oh, yeah. So good. Pay me, please. I'll do it. I'll drink it all the time. I do it already. I'll still buy. You also had a stint in there with Fangoria too, right?
Yeah. Oh man, that's
was this during the time
episode.
when they weren't paying people, or was this during the better times?
No, this is definitely in the not getting paid time. No, the long and short of it was, I became through Newsarama. Like I said, you meet a lot of people, and I had reviewed a pretty great book called Grave Girls that this guy Scott Lucina was part of, and I met him in person at one of the Wizard World Chicago shows. And it was kind of funny because I had a friend named James Elledge that passed away many years ago. And when I happened upon where Scott's booth was, I stopped because this guy looked a lot like James, and it freaked me out.
Oh.
And then when I realized that it was this guy that I had conversations with online, that was really weird. But we started talking, and we talked about doing some work together. And he had a couple of things, a couple of book adaptations into comics they were going to work on. And so I was going to do some stuff with Midnight Show. And one day he called me and he said, "Hey man, we're not going to be Midnight Show anymore. We're going to be Fangoria." I was like, "What?" And he had made the deal to do the Fangoria comics in print. And this was around 2006, 2007. And, that happened, Fangoria comics in print. And, I was the associate editor on it. If you find any of those books, Bump, Beneath the Valley of the Rage, Strangeland, etc., there's my name, the associate editor, Troy Brownfield. And it was really cool to start with. The Bump books sold really well. They were on newsstands. They weren't just in comic shops, but Fango racked them right next to Fangoria and Starlog on the racks,
Wow.
and they sold quite a few through Barnes and Noble and whatnot. But it was through the time where the company was pretty insolvent. They had announced that movie studio deal, and they had the radio shows and all this different stuff.
Mhm.
And when they started sliding toward the bankruptcy, the first thing to go was the comics. And even though they had been making money and they'd been coming out for many months, they just whacked the line all of a sudden. They didn't let some of the minis that were in progress finish. It was just one day they were just whoo. And so, it was one of those things where it's like a high to see your name in a Fango book and to have grown up stealing looks at Fangoria in the magazine section of Woolco and stuff, and
Yeah.
things, and then see your name in a Fangoria book. And I was writing some stuff on the Fangoria website, and then all of a sudden the comics were gone. And we had went to San Diego Comic-Con on Fangoria. Michael Madsen was involved in creating a book. We're hanging out with Madsen and everything. It was crazy. It was like very soon after San Diego that happened. So you had this kind of crazy high of doing that, and then a couple weeks later, it was like, which is comics in a nutshell.
Yeah.
that is comics, kids. So, but it is you have a lot of divergences. Like, I know you've had one podcasting life become another podcasting life,
Mhm.
and you worked in spaces involving movies and everything before. You know how it is, where you kind of move from one thing. You kind of I don't want to be one of those assholes who says it's like a shark, man, you got to keep swimming and stuff, but you do.
Right, yeah, all the bullshit. Yeah, it's true. It's just kinder than it sounds. And you end up doing things that if you'd have told your younger self that you either wouldn't believe them or be like, I'd be happy doing what?
Yeah,
Was it the dream?
Yeah, I think that it on one level it's kind of funny that in the past 2 years, the thing I've written most outside of the Saturday Evening Post is Topps trading cards.
Okay.
And I've written a lot of Topps trading cards, mostly Star Wars stuff, like The Mandalorian Season 1, the 2020 and 2021 Masterworks and all that. I wrote all of those. And it's not something that you can easily hand somebody and
Right.
say, but it has been a very consistent field of work, and sometimes it can be just really fun. There's deadline pressure and things with it, and you have to be exacting about certain things, but man, it is really funny to think I just got paid to write a card about Chewbacca. That's so weird that
Right. And the fact the beauty of it is too, and one thing I saw from meeting you, because we had once worked together at a place
yeah.
and discovered each other and enjoy things. But one thing about you is like finding out you're a comic writer from here. We're in Indianapolis, Indiana. Like, well, you can do that from here. They don't force you to go. Like, just the thought of myself like being like, I am happier artistically and feel more accomplished than I ever was when I was living in Los Angeles, in the place you got to be to do this kind of stuff. And it's odd that it's happened here mentally and, actually on paper. Like, it's weird, but you can do that.
Yeah, God bless the internet, right?
Right. Yeah.
You got that. You've got. I think that a lot of us that grew up with kind of 70s and 80s comics, we had the idea of the Marvel bullpen that everybody kind of clocked in, and we're all in a big clubhouse or whatever. But even then, you didn't think of the freelance artists who had to be mailing their stuff in, but just the kind of democratization of technology. Artists can draw from anywhere without even using paper anymore.
Yeah.
And writers can write conceivably from anywhere. So a lot of the kind of friendships you make in comics really do originate online. And then, it's kind of a treat when you meet / get to see some of these people at conventions and whatnot. That's really, the kind of, for me, has always been the good thing about conventions has been seeing people. And, it's just one of those happy byproducts of it, that you can actually do this from afar. Like I mentioned the Brazilian guys, Paulo Yonami and Cuber Ball, for example, they both worked to degrees on the Blood Queen stuff I did for Dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just happened to really like those guys. And, as we worked on this stuff together, it just people you kind of stay in touch with, and you're able to do stuff.
Right.
One of the things they say it about all writing, and it's particularly true in comics, but 3 things that will keep you working are being on time, being nice, and being good. And if you can get 2 of the 3, you'll get to keep working. And so I think there's within that if you just are kind of, genuine with people and form those relationships, that a lot of times when people are in a position to distribute work among others, then they will want to do it with their friends or the people who are nice to them or the people who help them out. And I think that, that's a positive cycle to perpetuate.
For sure. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you've been doing all you mentioned, the cards you've been doing. You've been on, currently you're with Graphic Policy and, of course, the Saturday Evening Post, which has been your gig for a couple years now, and over 300 pieces.
3, yeah.
So 100 pieces a
That's
year.
right. That's I mainly put that to amuse myself, because I noticed it one day. Let's see, my first day in was June 14th, 2018. And I first noticed kind of the ticker within, because, like just about everybody else, we excuse me, a WordPress kind of system, and it breaks up the posts like who's behind it. I just noticed it one day. I'm like, wow, I'm in the 90s. I had to say something about the 100th. And then as it went on, like, man, I'm gonna really be racking these up over time. So I started kind of like making the joke about my 299th post. And it was just, but it feels good to be that productive. I mean, you have a lot of material out there, and I get a lot of opportunities at the Post to write about really cool stuff. I've done a lot of American history bits, which is one of the Post's bags, but also I really get to determine a lot of the stuff that I write about.
Gotcha.
I mean, there's not a lot of places where you can come in and say, I want to write about the Elric saga. And everybody will say, huh? Or, I get a lot of latitude to write some of those things.
I mean,
like this week I'm writing about Duran, and
I don't think people realize how eclectic the posts on the Saturday Evening Post are. Like, and I think it's a totally underappreciated, underseen place, because I mean, even outside of your stuff, like they post stuff that I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And it's an interesting little bit of place that I think people, if they would go to it, they'd like it a lot more. It's like well-rounded, got weird stuff, got interesting takes on normal stuff, but
yeah, one of the things I really like about it is that there is kind of a two-way vibe with the Post, and you have the historical Post that's the celebrating America past, present, and future kind of tagline and the things that they do, and 200 literal years of Post history, because it was 1821 when it started, late summer of 1821. So you have 200 years of this history to go back on. The Post is literally seen the Civil War.
Yeah.
They reported on, they embedded guys with the army in World War One. Yeah. And so these archives exist, this material that you can draw from all that. And so a lot of the stuff that Jeff Nielsen writes in particular, who's our archivist, and Ben Relton, who's an American history professor, they do it with this incredible perspective and all this material that's available from the history of the Post. So you have kind of this lane, and then you have this lane over here, which is what I call not just Americana, but like American culture is popular culture.
Right.
If you look at, say, French culture, you have hundreds of years of art and architecture and cuisine, and up all kinds of history going back and forth. And England's the same way. And then you get to the States where you know a lot of the stuff that came out of America, the way that movies worked, all due respect to Méliès and everything, it it informed the world's culture. So in a way, American culture from a certain point on
I'll
is
say London
popular
owned the
culture.
60s, though.
Yeah.
London owned the 60s.
Yeah. We did. The Post did have Joan Didion writing about Haight-Ashbury. They did have that. So, but yeah, and of course hell, man, the Beatles, when they went to India, a reporter from the Post went with them.
Oh, okay.
That's when they met the Maharishi.
Yeah.
That was 2 Post cover stories, was the Beatles and India. So
Damn.
I haven't gotten to do that, but I have gotten to go to DC and San Jose and do some other cool stuff. And I got to be inside of Facebook and Google both, which was weird.
Cool.
So I've done more newsy things. Got to go to Politico, been at the Washington Press Club. So we did some weird stuff that's like very newsy. But a lot of the times when I get the opportunity, I'm like, this week about Bigfoot.
Yes. Oh yeah. Definitely love it. Hawk the Slayer is directed by Terry Marcel, written by Marcel and Harry Robertson, starring Jack Palance, John Terry, Patricia Quinn, Bernard Bresslaw, Peter O'Farrell, Cheryl Campbell, and Catriona McCall. And it is, long story short, with the aid of his companions, a man seeks to defeat his evil brother who has taken a nun hostage. So Troy, as always with these films, Hawk the Slayer, why you bring it to the table?
Couple things. This week at the Post, I just did a big article on sword and sorcery boom of the 1980s, of which Hawk is obviously a part, and in a way one of the forerunners, because it came out in 1980. The reason I chose this particular time to do the article was because exactly 40 years ago, June of 1981, Clash of the Titans and Dragon Slayer opened 2 weeks apart from each other. Clash of the Titans opened June 12th against Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Dragon Slayer opened a couple weeks later. One of the interesting things about that, real quick, is Clash of the Titans actually finished 11th for the year at the box office. It had a really strong year. People weirdly have kind of written it off as like some kind of bomb, and it wasn't. It was a huge hit. It made a shitload of money.
It's weird how some people like think of things that aren't true, just I don't know, because maybe the effects became a little, they're still rad, they're Harryhausen, but they became a little more obvious. They're like, oh, cheesy movie. I'm like, it wasn't. It was an effects masterpiece at the time. So,
yeah. And the thing with for me with Hawk, I actually, the first time I heard about it, I picked the 4-quad UK poster here to put as my backdrop, because that's the first image I saw of Hawk the Slayer was in a Starlog magazine. They had this poster. They're talking about this movie. It was a UK only release, as far as I knew at the time. It was like 7 or 8, and I didn't see it until a couple, maybe 3 years later on Sammy Terry in Indianapolis. For those who don't know, Sammy Terry was our local horror host, and they would have genre movies and whatnot. And so I saw Hawk the Slayer on TV for the first time, and I loved it. And even then I knew that there were some cheeseball elements to it, because by that point, it was maybe roughly 9 or 10. I'd already seen, Logan's Run, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, Empire. I'd seen some pretty good ones and some pretty bad ones.
Yeah, this came out the same year Empire Strikes Back came out.
Yeah, I saw, I sasaw Star Crash at the drive-in, that kind of thing. So you had the span, you knew, but man, there's a lot I loved about it, and throughout the rest of the 80s, there just turned out to be a whole lot of movies in the same flavor, and I kind of write it off in a way, and you already mentioned this, Brandon, that when people get to a certain age that were fans of a thing, they can now bring that in because they're the ones making the movies. And I think that there are a lot of these guys, particularly in England and certain parts of the States, who probably grew up on Tolkien and Michael Moorcock, and
Yeah.
they got to the point where it's like, we can make movies now. We're doing this.
Right.
It
Lucas and
became,
Spielberg, basically. Yeah.
yeah, and now, Kevin Feige
Mhm.
having, when he got the reins, look what he did.
Mhm.
And so you do have this, and it, you mentioned, Marcel and Robertson. Um, Marcel directing the movie, Robertson producing. The two of them wrote it together. Robertson, the composer, which we should also spend some time on in talking about Hawk the Slayer. But but it's, you know that these two guys had an affinity for this kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and
Well, there's a lot
you know,
like with Robertson too. He was a music guy for Hammer, a lot of Hammer stuff. So
yeah, he did all the Karnstein movies. Yep,
yeah, yeah,
he
he did
did
that whole trilogy. Yeah.
Lust for
Uh,
Vampire, Yeah, you got your. I wore an Excalibur T-shirt to go
there we
with
go.
the
There we go. Fair enough.
closest I had. But yeah, so it was.
But yeah, so he's on Hammer. There's a lot of talent here that I was like, so Marcel, he he had a movie called There Goes the Bride, which he had John Terry was in it before this,
Yeah,
and there was one Smothers brother in it. Um, and he'd go on to make Prisoners of the Lost Universe, but he was also a second unit director on Straw Dogs and three or four Pink Panther movies and the Ridley Scott movie The Duelist, his first movie. And then
yeah,
when you go to cinematographer, yeah, Paul Beeson, he did a lot of Magical World of Disney in the 60s, The Saint, and then he did Moon Zero 2, Miss MST3K fans, you'll know that one.
yeah.
Star Crash, he shot that. But his additional photography is where he stands out. So he does Swiss Family Robinson, Sound of Music, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of
That's what
Doom,
it was.
Last Crusade, Ishtar, Willow, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Alien 3. Big deal. Like he
Yeah,
is a
he's the guy. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say he's the guy that actually hung out of the helicopter to shoot Julie Andrews on the
mhm,
opening hillside
yeah.
sequence. Like, that's crazy. I mean,
And he works on
that's,
Hawk. He shoots Hawk the Slayer like that.
yeah,
But
that's the gamut. That's showbiz, kids.
yeah, and then editor Eric Boyd Perkins obviously was a friend of Robertson because he was an editor for a lot of Hammer films as well. So they crossed paths there, including like the Gorgon, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, She, Night Creatures. But he also he did three episodes of The Prisoner. He edited the Wicker Man, and he also did additional editing on For Your Eyes Only, ADR for the Monster Squad and Clue, and additional sound editing for Bridge on the River Kwai. So people here had some cred or would go on to have even more cred later on. It's pretty interesting for this production to have all this talent and then they're all stuffed in a room with $5 basically. But
Yeah,
I'll argue for what they have, things work. Like that in the opening scene we get this elven stone thing that floats over, which now in
yeah,
HD you can kind of see the string getting ready, but it floats over to this hilt that has a hand on it and it opens up and grabs it. And that looks good.
yeah.
That's a good
That
effect.
it's you know, it's what Stephen King called the set of reality.
Hmm.
That, if you grew up watching Bonanza, you think that the Ponderosa Ranch and everything is a real ranch.
Yeah.
And then later you look at it as an adult and you realize, oh, it's a set.
Yeah.
The trees are fake and everything. And so then you kind of lose that. And I think that's definitely something with Hawk. You come at it as a kid
Yeah.
and you haven't seen a movie like this necessarily.
Right.
Because you have to contextualize it too for the audience. When you think about 1980s, pre Conan, it's pre Beastmaster, it's pre, all kinds of stuff that you would, and really it comes out just a couple of months or so after Empire.
Hmm.
So it's not, you know,
It got lapped
Empire's
before it
May
even
of
got on
80.
the
I think this
track.
is
Yeah.
later in
Yeah.
80. Yeah. Yeah. And you look at probably the grandest jump. Logan's Run is a good, entertaining movie. and it's got effects that were great at the time. They win the Oscar in '76, but Logan's Run over here and Star Wars over here.
1 year.
Yeah,
1 year. Yeah.
that's a huge that is an actual paradigm shift for people who love to use that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
For we're redecorating the office. A paradigm shift is,
Yes.
is Logan's Run to Star Wars. And you still had a lot of productions that, Lucas had everybody. Lucas got the craftsman. He had Dykstra to start with, and he created ILM and stuff. And a lot of the other places just didn't have people like that.
No.
And so they're still working on, for lack of a better word, the Logan's Run plateau, where this was done by ITC. So ITC and BBC we're used to kind of working on the cheap.
Yeah.
You consider Doctor Who, which we love and everything, but they knew how to squeeze a nickel to try to get stuff on the screen.
Right.
And,
but I mean, I will give the BBC incredible set builders, especially period design. Even though now you can, their sets and stuff, I'm like, man, the detail, and I have a fondness for just freaking sets. Like, old school, new, TV stuff. I just love the thought of people beating hammers, getting it all, like little designs, and just I have an appreciation for that and people physically being in the realm.
Yeah,
definitely.
Some of the best looking stuff in Hawk the Slayer is outside.
Yeah,
I mean, you just it's hard to beat an English forest. That they.
I particularly
one
like
of the scenes I really like in the movie is the camp attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
like
that
camp attack works really well outside with the fog and everything.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like the exterior of the convent church or whatever. That just looks really cool to me. I don't know why. It's some simple little set. But also I got to throw in, I love, and I know my listeners are I love matte paintings. Anytime you decorate with matte paintings, love it. Love it. Favorite matte painter of all time, James Cameron. He's a good guy. He didn't do this film, but I will point out always that he was my favorite matte painter. He did an Escape from New York. He did the matte paintings for that.
Becky and the boys and I watched Silverado the other night,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of those things that I said, appreciate that this was just shot outside.
Mm-hmm.
this incredible scenery is someone just pointing a camera in one direction and just look at what you get.
Yeah.
And so
big.
I do think that this benefits from some of those scenes for sure, but I think that for me, one of the engines of the movie is like basic mythology.
Okay.
The idea of good brother, evil brother, magic sword, this stuff is pretty fundamental. But I'd also challenge anybody to find too many movies before this that did any of that. There weren't a lot.
Might have been a biblical epic, but yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Demetrius and the Gladiators. You don't have a whole hell of a lot of this. Jason and the Argonauts, maybe. Like stuff that was expressly based on myth.
Yeah.
Not expressly based on the fantasy genre.
Mm-hmm.
Disney was doing fairy tales, and you had a couple of like the original Jack the Giant Slayer and a few other Harryhausen Enterprises, the first Sinbad movie.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot like this.
No, and this is pre-Conan, before everybody starts knocking it off.
So.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's really, it's interesting to me because it feels like they're all like all these things come in the wake of Conan the Barbarian, but they're not. They start before that. They kind of come in the wake of Star Wars for some reason. There's Star Wars exploitation, and then you get a big push in fantasy, which is quite interesting. Hawk the Slayer, like the cast, like some of the cast, like Jack Palance is here, and he's playing Darth Vader, kind of with that helmet. And
Voltan.
He in this movie he wavers between being really invested in it and then yawning through some scenes. Like it's a real back and forth. Like there in moments I'm like, I don't think he really wants to be here, and then someone's like, oh geez, like he's really selling this. But it's an interesting throughout the film, how his back and forth. I don't know if he got called back for some reshoots he didn't want to do, or in that line of the film, but
Yeah, he has. I really like the scene where the guys have all been taken captive, and he's kind of mocking them, and he has that great delivery of the dwarf, and all the bad guys
yes.
laugh. I'm like, that's just top flight Palance right there. That's that's him going full scenery chew, but
Right.
but yeah, he's a weird presence. He's one of those guys that for decades and decades played almost nothing but bad guys, and he leans into the expectation you have of him pretty hard. So there's not a lot of subtlety anywhere. And I think Terry does a good job as kind of the taciturn hero, man on a mission of vengeance, etc. He kind of holds his own against Palance, which is basically all you could ask. But the funny thing is,
his brother 39 years difference age.
That's what I was just about
and his
to
father
say.
only 3.
Yeah, the actor who played his dad is only 3 years older than Palance. But I love that. Kind of the inventiveness of it. But you've got Hawk is dressed like Han Solo. There's no way around it. He's wearing Han's clothes. I mean, like you mentioned the Darth Vader thing,
and he kind of looks like Bronson Pinchot a little bit. Like if you get him at the right angle, I'm like. But yeah, like John Terry, like of course he was. I mean, a lot of people know him as Jack's dad from Lost. He would be Felix Leiter 7 years later in The Living Daylights. He's had some notable stints on, like I think he was on ER for a bit, and definitely people know him.
He's been around. But
not as a lead so much. Yeah,
on Lost because of Hawk the Slayer.
Oh. I mean, of course. That's where you get him.
If we're talking actors, we should mention a couple others for sure. Bernard Bresslaw, who plays Gort the Giant, was also Rel the Cyclops from Krull. So he was a lot of work.
He's got the cred for these 80s fantasy. And they also, which reminded me from Rocky Horror, Patricia. She wears that thing around her face that has the Cyclops eye, which reminded me of Krull when watching it.
Yeah, and I love that her character's name is Woman.
Yeah.
It's just Woman. But it's a super interesting take, because there's a lot of stuff that's implied about the world building that they did. It's a good week for that, because there's a meme going around, like one of the variations of the Peter and Mary Jane meme from the first Spider-Man. That's where he tells her something hurtful, and he says, you have to stop at some point. You have to stop world building to actually write the story. But they obviously thought about the story, and that this takes place in the context of other things happening, because they talk about armies massing in different places, and that Voltan has conquered kind of this part of it, but that there's other stuff going on. So they had a context to it. The giants, the elves, and the dwarves are gone. Hawk's friends are the last of their kind, which lends itself to, hey, what else has been happening here? How did Hawk become friends with these guys? What was the context of that? It poses world questions, which are kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of time between the opening scene and the when the story picks up, and I'm not sure. It's the marriage stuff, the girl thing. Does that happen after the opening scene, or did that happen before the opening scene?
I think it happens before the opening scene, because
so I was thinking, but I was just thinking right now. I was like, wait, maybe it could have happened in between. I don't know.
I get the feeling that like maybe Elena's died, and a Hawk because he was injured in the boat, and then recovers, goes after Voltan. Voltan kills their dad. He gets the Mind Stone.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's
true. That's where he's set up. Which I will say his wife, played by Catriona McCall, who is famous from Lucio Fulci movies. She's in
Yeah.
the Gates of Hell trilogy. I love her as an actor. Like, I'm a big fan of hers, actually. A lot I discovered her with those films, but anytime I can find something new to see her in, I'm really excited by it, because I don't think when they talk about final girls, scream queens, whatever, she doesn't get mentioned, and I think she should be up there. She's quite terrific and leads a hell of an awesome Italian horror trilogy of movies. But she's here to, be like a prize to be won and then murdered. So
Well, it is cast well, I think.
yeah.
I don't know much about the actor who plays Crow the elf, but I like his kind of deadpan delivery. He does have kind of a otherworldly presence, and it
Right.
runs up nicely against what the hell is the guy's I can never remember, Ralph, the one-handed crossbowman.
Yeah.
That guy is great in the he reminds me now, he makes me think of Liam Cunningham in Game of Thrones, Sir Davos. He's got that same kind of, he's got
Right.
Sir Davos energy. Like, he's the old guy that's kind of seen it all, and he's still alive, and he's missing a hand, but damn it, he's not going to let him kill a bunch of nuns. He's just,
Right.
great presence.
We mentioned Doctor Who earlier, and I gotta point out that Christopher Benjamin's in here. He's the guy doing the archery, gambling, and he was notable. He was in Doctor Who, one of the most classic Tom Baker stories, Talons of Wang Chian. He played Jago of the popular Jago and Lightfoot team up, which I think Big Finish has made spin-offs of his character. And another one, they're kind of like a Sherlock and Holmes duo that were paired with the Doctor in that story. But he was also in New Who in the Unicorn and the Wasp episode with during the David Tennant time, which was the Agatha Christie episode.
Yes.
But he's the guy betting all the archery in the woods. So another.
Yeah, and speaking of the archery, this my son Connor, my 16-year-old, his favorite thing about the movies is the super fast archery.
Yeah, super fast.
There's the crazy idea of the automatic crossbow, and then Crow shoots just as fast. But there's one scene at the fight in the Abbey where Crow is doing the rapid fire. He's doing the rapid fire archery, but the camera is moving with each shot.
Yeah.
So it gives the illusion that he's maybe actually pulling, knocking, and firing with each, but it's just the camera just.
Could you imagine cutting that? This is film. This isn't like digital stuff we could do today. That had to have been a pain in the ass, and they do it a lot. It's not like it's just one cool effect and then they maybe show it later, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it's present. It's part of the to get all film school. It is part of the visual language of the piece. I mean, they really lean in.
I will mention with this movie, one thing I really think is pretty rad about this, aside from Catriona McCall, people survive getting hit by these arrows a lot in the movie. Like, people don't die. There are kill shots, and then people just like, well, I'll be better in the next scene. Like, it's stunning. Ralph, he gets one. Does Hawk get one too? Yeah, I think
he's shot. The boat scene toward the whole thing where Elaine dies. He's actually shot.
Yeah. There's a lot of people get shot with arrows like deep, and they survive. I'm like, okay, all right, that's pretty nifty. In most movies they'd be dead, but yeah.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's a lot of interesting career. I know it's funny when you take it in the context where we are now. There have been a couple of YouTube compilations of like goofiest scenes, and they always focus on the silly string and neon bouncy balls, parts of the magic. The magic representation, with the exception of the fog, is kind of goofy. I dig the Phantom Zone rings, where the sorceress helps Hawk find all of his people. That's cool, man. Here's
the thing. I have always said with these movies, the effects don't hold up to today's standards. You know why? It was made in 1980. It wasn't a big studio movie, and I'm not forgiving of like all movies, but I always, when I watch, I am able to put myself in the mindset of when it was made, what it had going for it, and if they're trying to do not as good, the silly string thing, yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
unforgivable. But like the rest of it, I'm like, they're actually trying. They're making something. And I have, guess what? We don't have a lot as viewers anymore. Imagination, or the ability to
Yep.
to surrender yourself through a movie. Everybody goes into movies now like,
Yeah.
we didn't used to do that. We used to be like Hawk the Slayer, and you would somehow engulf yourself in the world. And I don't want to say like, oh well, that's because we don't get to see these in theaters. I was enraptured in these worlds on VHS pan and scan tapes.
Yeah.
And when they come to Blu-ray and stuff and they get restored, I'm even more wow. Even if I can see the strings, I'm like, you know what, this would look pretty nice on a big screen, and a clean print. But I mean, I'm able to surrender myself if I can tell that they're not cheap, they're talented, they're doing what they can in the the era that they did with what was available. So
Yeah. And this is something that people would want to beat up and say that there's, oh, this is a plot hole or whatever. And again, people on the internet have a very poor understanding of what a plot hole actually
they
is.
suck at watching movies.
Yeah. The I will give you that you have to suspend a lot of disbelief if you watch 24 because, Kiefer Sutherland cannot drive across Los Angeles on a commercial
Oh
break.
hell no.
but, that one aside, Crow saying he's the last elf, and they never explained what happened to the elves. That's not a plot hole, man.
No.
That's
We don't need to,
that's
if the characters understand. Like, there's also the coin. Like, give us coin. Why? What's with it? Was just a signal.
because
Like,
in a previous adventure, Hawk met these guys and
yeah,
said, "If you ever need me, give me this coin."
people
And
aren't able to think to put things together in their heads with stuff, or just we're a lot. Not everything matters. Not everything is bullshit. We don't need backstories of this. That, like, that's why we have these bloated like 2.5 hour movies. Like, this thing gets out of here in a swift 90 minutes, and I'm saying, like, gets the basics down. You don't need everything. And guess what? The whole gang, they don't need to be deep. The dwarf and the giant, they play a C3PO R2D2 role. Like, and that's
yeah,
all they need to be. We don't need, you know.
yeah, they are comic relief,
Mm-hmm.
and the giant is the strong. Think of it too in the eternal, Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, Dirty
Mm-hmm.
Dozen kind of. Everybody's
Yeah.
got the giant is the muscle,
Yeah.
but and he and they're also the comic relief. Crow is the silent but lethal member of the team.
He's the cold-hearted badass. He's the Clint Eastwood guy that comes into the
Yeah,
team. Like, yeah.
the piece of the dead.
Yeah.
He's like he's the guy that the one guy in the group that always says the weird shit.
Yes.
Yeah, it's well put together in terms of that. I think we've kind of held off long enough, but I've got to get into the music.
Oh,
The Harry Robertson. Holy
very
shit, do I love the music of this?
sci-fi disco shit is my jam. I will tell you what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by
Oh,
way of Enrico Morricone, it's
right.
just that and it's just
It's got that Italian exploitation, like goblin-esque kind of feel to it at times.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
and
so rad.
yeah, and it breaks out all the time, and the little whistle slash hawk noise, whatever they use it repeated, like every time he shows up when he's recruiting
Oh yeah.
the guys, and it's when Connor and I went to watch it the first time, I said, okay, man, I don't want you to expect cinematic perfection from this movie, but this movie is cinematic perfection. And about the third or fourth time that they did the hawk noise, he's like, I get it.
Yeah.
You know? He
I've
just
been
looked at me like,
entranced.
I get it, but yeah,
Oh.
it's just that you have to think that the guys, actors' experiences can vary for a lot of different reasons. But you have to think that Marcel and Robertson had a huge amount of fun making this thing. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
you can't
absolutely.
imagine a ton of fun. I mean, who sits down and writes that soundtrack without just enjoying the hell out of themselves? I mean,
Oh, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. No, all the like these. Yeah, we'll get in this fantasy genre as a whole to wrap when we wrap it up. But yeah, like there's, I mean, this movie, when you break it down stuff, there's a lot of just like traveling in the woods stuff that happens in the movie that I'm just like, oh, they did kind of a clever way of mixing it up with these little different showcases, scenarios. Like each member kind of gets their own little snippet to introduce the people to it.
Yeah.
I did notice there was this weird um kind of parallels to Monty Python and the Holy Grail that incidentally happen in this, where like Hawk
Yeah.
comes upon the woman and she's like it's clearly the burn her witch scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's like, how do you know she's a witch? I was like, what? And then there's the scene,
Build a bridge out of her.
the scene where Voltan and his son come upon these peasants eating, and it's very much the Dennis, I didn't know you were called Dennis scene from Monty Python. I was like, was this intentional? Were they trying to do serious version? Like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. But I was like, what more? There's possibly more here because he does go around to get his band, but I just couldn't believe it. And then they're in a convent with a bunch of nuns too. So I mean, hey, that's up there too. But it was like weird parallels with the Holy Grail that I couldn't believe were happening.
Is that? Do you think that's just something that's maybe uniquely British? That
Might be.
they at some point they're working on the movie and they say, "Man, we unconsciously wrote the same kind of fantasy trope scenes that are in Holy Grail. We might as well just lean into it."
Right? Yeah, just play it straight. Let's just do it. People will notice or they won't. There'll be these things called podcasts in 40 years. They're gonna notice it, but right now we're safe. So, oh man. Are you there? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you had a little bit of a lag. But...
So did you on my end. So I guess we're frozen. All right. One of the things I was reading that this was apparently a take on Yojimbo, but I got none of that.
No, I wouldn't. That's a weird kind of take. I mean, I think Yojimbo, you have to expressly be pitting two forces against each other with
one person, and there was none of
but
that.
It does vibe Kurosawa with the men on a mission thing. I mean, certainly. I think whoever made the remark, I think they just got their movie wrong.
Yeah.
It's I find that there's an awful lot of stuff written about movies that people try to do from memory without going back to look at it, and then it's very easily, hey, that's wrong.
Right.
And because I think the whole point of Yojimbo that you see, I mean, hell, Yojimbo is itself adapted from Red Harvest by Dashiell Hammett, the Continental Op, and then becomes Yojimbo and then Fistful of Dollars. It's all one guy. It's the guy alone in this situation. So I think that's just a misread.
Gotcha.
But it does have the flavor of the, I mean, really, what comes before Kurosawa assembling the Seven Samurai? Like the last thing before that is like maybe the Three Musketeers, the Merry Men, Jason and the Argonauts. I mean,
right.
It's getting the band together as a long-standing.
True.
I mean, hell, if you're thinking of these guys operating in 1980 and having come from maybe like the Tolkien cult and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the Fellowship if not, Kurosawa getting the band together?
Right. I will say we were always speaking of the Tolkien in the 80s. We were robbed of the John Boorman Lord of the Rings, but we were gifted Excalibur, which is awesome. But it's so I always wonder, like, what would that John Boorman Lord of the Rings have looked like? And I look at Excalibur, I'm like, that'd have been an interesting movie seeing Lord of the Rings done back then. But
I bet you Helen Mirren would have been Galadriel.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's probably that. Just to take a side step, because I did talk about Excalibur in the post piece. What an eye for talent!
Yeah.
Holy shit! I mean, just like all these guys that it's their first movie.
Yeah.
Like Liam Neeson, Gabriel Byrne. So just going down the list. I mean, what a murderer's row of people to just pick up and if you look at Liam Neeson, he did a lot of these movies. for a while.
Yeah.
He's in Kroll. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, he shows up there. Yeah.
It's like, what do we do with the tall Irish guy? Send him to the sword and sorcery stuff.
It just build up a resume there.
Yeah.
This movie was supposed to have a sequel, Hawk the Destroyer, which is funny because that would be Conan's sequel.
Yeah.
And like, because we're led to like, it's the evil wizard says he's gonna resurrect Voltan, and then Hawk is told like, oh, you got to go down south and fight evil. So to another day, but that never.
Yeah, the
comes.
wizards are gathering in the south.
But unlike today, when you do that,
Yeah,
this movie's a
I don't know
complete film. Like it's start, finish, done. Little cliffhanger, we're out.
Yeah, they talked about that. And then a few years ago, they talked about a different idea of a Hawk movie called Hawk the Hunter, which would have been a prequel, which I imagine would have been Hawk meeting everybody for the first time or something. But
Right.
But I don't think, if you do, frankly, in 2021, if you do Hawk the Slayer now, you just have to redo Hawk the Slayer. I mean,
Right.
it's hard to make a sequel 41 years later. I mean, they ran into that with Sword the Sorcerer too. They tried to remake, they tried to do a sequel to that,
Mhm.
and it was, they turned out making sort of a sequel. Like Tales of the Empire or something, and like Lee
Right.
Horsley's in it, but it's it's a lot of these films, Conan notwithstanding, the sequel idea didn't, the ones that happened, like the Beastmaster sequels, were pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it was
What do you mean? Through the portal of time rules.
Yeah.
Said nobody.
All these films that we're talking about were huge Second Life on video or cable films. And so the impact, like the real popularity some of them had, didn't happen for years.
Yeah.
Excalibur we mentioned, and Clash of the Titans, those were solid hits. Dragon Slayer underperformed. Hawk the Slayer, who the hell knows?
Right.
But Beastmaster did okay in the theaters. It was fine. It was a reasonable movie, and my God, did it live on HBO and basic cable.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I couldn't find it. I tried to find it to put it into the article, but you probably remember this. TBS used to run commercials about how much they played Beastmaster.
They did, yeah. It's the Shawshank Redemption of the fantasy films, sword and sorcery films, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a real enthusiastic. It's like, movies made him a star, but we made him a legend.
Yes. I remember that, yes, yeah.
And I forget which comedian it was. It wasn't Patton Oswalt, but someone with the same vibe said HBO in the 1980s stood for Hey, Beastmaster's on.
Yes, yep. They actually,
you know.
on the Vinegar Syndrome 4K Ultra HD release, they have a section dedicated to that, and they have like Adam Wingard and Robert Cargill and people talking about their love of Beastmaster and having it come from watching it on TV. And they talk about, hey, Beastmaster's on with that too. Yeah.
Yeah, this was where I grew up in Terre Haute, and that was one of the benefits of the drive-in. Was you would see crazy shit at the drive-in. Like, I did see Beastmaster at the drive-in, and like I mentioned before, Star Crash, Fantastic Planet, the animated film, I saw at the drive-in.
There you go. So in the realm of like all these fantasy films of, let's say, like the early 1980s, and let's throw Conan out of there because that's obviously one that stands tall. But where do you hold Hawk in this lexicon? Is it your favorite, or?
It's a weird thing. I love Hawk. It's in the way that you have songs that you love from your childhood. Whatever. It's not a perfect movie.
Yeah.
But I posted a picture today that was some of the DVDs and whatnot that went into it, and those are my real favorites. I'll get toss Conan back in there.
Yeah.
But Hawk and Beastmaster, more than say Kroll and Sword and the Sorcerer, but I love those two for various reasons. But Hawk and Beastmaster are probably my two favorites
Gotcha.
of the group. And I think Beastmaster, man, all props to Coscarelli. That is a complete movie.
That is a
first one.
tight film. Like, it is a really well done film.
Literally everything pays off. Like everything's got a setup to it and executed. Like they set stuff up all the way along, and the bat / owl / crazy whatever the hell they are people, like the thing with the medallion, and it's just what a little Swiss watch that is.
Definitely. I'm a big fan of Kroll.
Oh yeah,
and that one actually crosses. That could be that one could be seen more both fantasy and both Star Wars knockoff. That one covers both grounds.
Yeah,
but I've always really enjoyed Kroll. I don't know why, and I've enjoyed these films now. I had it as a kid, kind of like him, but now I have more of a fondness for them now. It's just maybe because we don't get these. They don't make movies like they used to, because when we get they're big CG spectacles. We get to see the dragons now. The movie will probably look like the poster art. But there's a fondness I have of these movies now. Definitely a lot of nostalgia lens to it. But like Kroll, I really like Beastmaster, Hawk. Yeah,
Kroll is interesting in that it's new ideas are happening all the time.
Yeah.
In that there's this you start off initially with a very strange take of it's a fantasy world that's been invaded by aliens.
Yeah.
So the Beast and the Slayer are aliens. They have visual cues to alien.
Mm-hmm.
The Slayers are clearly monsters because when they're killed, the little things run out of their heads and burrow into the ground, which is crazy shit.
Mm-hmm.
But they land in a world where magic and everything already exists. Urgo is a magician. He can, shoot fireballs, become a fireball, become tiger, and all this. They've got cyclopses. They've got doppelgangers.
Giant spiders and caves.
Yeah, that stuff already existed. So
two females. One is an evil sorceress in a cave, and the other is the prize to be won.
Well, she wasn't an evil sorceress all along. She didn't love Ynir.
True.
That's a weird backstory thing that they throw in all of a sudden.
It's
just like the Widow of the Web was in love with Ynir when he was young. What?
It also has Liam Neeson. It is a lot of movie, and I enjoyed it. I went and saw the riff tracks live of Kroll in the theater just so I could see Kroll in the theater. It wasn't so much I could laugh at it, but it was like, I have never seen Kroll on the big screen, and this is the opportunity I have through riff tracks to see Kroll on the big screen.
Yeah, it is, and the glaive is cool. I mean, it's a super. Like I said, I have a hard time.
I have a enamel pin of the glaive.
The movies at all. I mean, I genuinely enjoy Kroll. Right on. I do think Sword and the Sorcerer, of the ones that were popular, because Sword and the Sorcerer was actually a really big hit based on budget. Oh my god, did it make money? But it is super goofy. The three-bladed sword is one of the most ridiculous weapons in the history of movies, but I do enjoy it because everybody looks like they're having the best time. Sword the Sorcerer is like the cast equivalent of watching the Foo Fighters on stage. Like, those guys look like they're just enjoying every freaking thing they do. And if you watch that movie, Lee Horsley looks like he's about to burst out laughing in every scene. He's just like, look at this. This is awesome. What am I doing here?
And I was
reminds me of Deathstalker 2 a little bit.
Yeah, the first two Deathstalkers are entertaining. I will give that, for different reasons.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, the Deathstalker 2 is hilarious.
I mean, it's a good comedy. The first one's like, here's your straight sleazy B-level, Conan knockoff, and then you get a comedy version the second time around. So
yeah,
those are great.
But this is, like you said, man, this is a thing that I think some people are sad they missed.
Yeah.
They didn't get this run, because when we see fantasy stuff now, it's either straight to Netflix like Witcher or whatever, but it's also fairly serious.
Mm-hmm.
Shadow and Bone, and I mean Game of Thrones obviously, but it's the seriousness bar has been raised for all of the things, and I don't know if that's because people felt like they were being made fun of to the extent that they have to be very straight-faced when they make them to
Well, it's kind of like the comic book thing and stuff like where people I want to oh no, like they really want like really seriously taken thing. Like no, you just want the studio to put money into it and people who care about it making it. That's what you want. And then people there's like this thing. It comes from like a lot of it like oddly weirdly comes from the DC side of things, like where they like really need serious version. Like if you look at their little fan base things, and I'm not all DC people. I know they're not all assholes and stuff like that, but
Right.
there's this sect of fandom people that really want to see their things taken super seriously. And I'm like, no, you just want a good movie made. Like that's just because it's super serious doesn't mean it's good. I mean, you go into self parody when you go way too serious,
Yeah.
but that's the thing that I think comes sort of backlash of years of being told comics are for kids or you'll outgrow those movies or toy collecting like people it's a backlash which I don't think there's generations coming up that aren't going to have that because it's been acceptable now, but for
Yeah.
a generation where yours and mine are, it was you were talked down to, made fun of, your movies weren't taken seriously, you got junk stuff like
Yeah. And I think too that there's an element of a lot of the people doing that must be serious are
mhm.
in our age group. There's a lot of
Yeah.
guys that are in their 40s, and I think that some of them have actually, for lack of a better word, or maybe it is the better word, infected some elements of
Mhm.
the younger fan base who really, not to be fogyish about this, really haven't had to deal with that shit.
Yeah.
If you're 20 right now, let's even give you 21.
Mhm.
You were 8 when Iron Man broke out.
Yeah.
You grew up with this stuff being the biggest stuff in the world.
Yeah.
Had t-shirts and cartoons and toys and comics and everything available everywhere at all times.
I can go to like
So
Target and Walmart and buy like a Star Wars shirt. That was not possible back when I was a kid.
hell, man, the other day it's like they had that lined up. There was literally Dragon Ball Z, Star Wars, My Hero Academia, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and on the other side they had like Wu-Tang Clan and Slayer, like at Target. Like, get out of here. You don't know.
We are oversaturated with this stuff. Like it's almost it hurts my brain and my
Yeah,
OCD, my anxiety about like, oh, I need all of it, right? Oh. Yeah.
but yeah, they don't. Here's a without going too far afield. Here's a great snapshot of exactly what you're talking about. Cast photo of the adult Shazams came out the other day,
Yeah.
and it's revealed that for whatever reason, I don't know what happened, they got rid of Michelle Borth, who played adult Mary Marvel, and Grace Fulton, who played Mary Broomfield, is playing both Mary and Mary Marvel. Only
Mhm.
actor in the cast who's doing that. In cast listings and in interviews a month ago, Michelle Borth was still talking about playing Mary Marvel. I don't
Mhm.
know what happened, but there are a lot of guys who are like, "Oh, good, Grace Fulton's hot, whatever." I'm like, "Are you 12? Michelle Borth is gorgeous. She
Yeah.
was you know, for lack of a better word, the hot chick in a lot of shows,
Right.
and she's done action. She's in the first movie. She's great. She's
Yeah.
great in all kinds of stuff. She's in Hawaii Five-O, and she was in Don't Tell Me You Love Me on HBO and
Mhm.
everything. She's really good. And your reaction is good. What's wrong with you? I don't even understand. It's worse that they haven't said anything about what happened.
Well, I don't know. David Sandberg is also a jokester, so it could be a silly thing from him, and could be a thing in the movie. I don't know. I'll wait till I see the movie, but yeah, it was odd.
Yeah, I found it to be very strange, but the reaction seemed to play into that kind of fanish thing, and I think that for a particular segment of fandom, they've been trained to make fun of the movies that we're talking about. They
Mhm.
they don't meet the films on their own terms. Like
Right. They go in
even an
expecting today's
Excalibur,
terms. Yeah.
which is a really exceptional piece of filmmaking in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, with some really great performances. Nicole Williamson as Merlin in particular. I don't think they know what they got. If they would say it moves too slow. They would say that there's too much
Yeah.
drama or romance or something. They
Well,
wouldn't.
there's a whole craft and technical thing that seems to be getting pushed aside or not appreciated and stuff, and like or not realizing there's a time and place for everything, for different types of things, and I think there's a lot of uppity towards creators and directors who they seem to say they want to appreciate, but they seem to worship the studio control of things. They want Disney controlling everything or doing this. And like, while I think what Kevin Feige's done is great, but that's championing the old 60s, pre-70s, like let the producer control it all type thing. So it's interesting what do they know what they're wanting or what they're saying, but
Yeah.
there seems to be like a nose turn up to creative types or people with strong visions, um, unless
Yeah.
they're under a leash. Like it's weird.
Yeah. I definitely think there's a lack of context
Hmm.
to it. And one of the things that was cool about all of these movies, with the exception of Conan, which was cool in its own regard, is they were original.
Yeah.
They were all new. I mean, you could make your crack about, oh, they're not original because they're all the same. Well, they're in a genre. They fit within a genre with tropes and so forth.
Yeah.
But Hawk was written for the screen. Beastmaster was written for the screen, etc. Dragon Slayer down the line. I mean, Beastmaster technically isn't an adaptation, very slightly, of the
Right.
Andre Norton story, The Beastmaster, but only to the extent of the main character could talk to animals.
Right. Yeah.
Everything
No,
else
that's it.
is
Yeah.
Coscarelli, everything else. But yeah, the majority of these films were original ideas set within the sword and sorcery genre.
Hmm. Yeah.
So you didn't have that context of, oh, are they getting it right? You don't know. It's brand new.
And people don't give the a shot. Like I've talked about, like there's been a lot of crazy, interesting, big budget science fiction films that have come out in the last decade. But if it doesn't have like like Valerian, not all of them like great, but like Jupiter Ascending, stuff like that. Um, and I wonder if Guardians of the Galaxy had come out and not had a Marvel logo or been promised been part of the Marvel thing, like would that have fared like those at the box office? Like
I don't know.
it's insane because I'm like there's movies just as fun as Guardians or just as crazy and weird ideas that I like. What was the one, Mortal Engines? I really liked that one, but nobody went and saw it. Um, but there's all these like crazy, like going for it original or based off really unknown property things coming out that are fun, doing all these same things, but it doesn't. It's not a familiar name, so they don't go see it. Like,
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Guardians because you will rarely find as big a fan of the Dan Abnett, Andy Lanning run of Guardians that directly inspired the movies as me.
yeah,
And the very idea that they were going to make a Guardians film with those characters had me just
insanity.
really excited. But the fact of the matter is, when they first showed the concept art and so forth at San Diego, a lot of the online reaction was instantly on the attack. Oh, this looks goofy. I don't understand this. I don't know what this is. I
First
haven't read
trailer
that book.
too.
I don't know
People thought
this.
the first trailer was there's some those serious people were like, "What's this goofy, jokey stuff?" Or like Ooga Chaka. Well, that's weird. I'm like, it's got its own flavor. Like
Yeah,
that's what it told me. Like this is gonna be crazy.
yeah. And so there was a lot of pushback and everything. And then when you actually see it, what a crazy idea! It's awesome. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
I still think that's one of the best ones they've put out. And yeah, like it. I remember that came out, and I was like, oh well. Good luck, Star Wars, when you come when you come out, and
yeah.
it was just like, holy crap. And yeah, it's weird what they won't give a chance to because
I
it doesn't come with an attached promise or name. Like you once didn't know what the hell Star Wars was, and you
yeah.
like like it's crazy.
I've made that point in many articles over the course of my writing life. Back to the even the college newspaper days. Everybody has to see something for the first time
Mhm.
sometime.
Yeah.
I did not become a big fan of David Lynch because I drew that card in the here's what you're interested in
Right.
deck.
These are my
You had to,
properties.
yeah, you had to come to it in a certain way and live with it and learn to you either appreciate it instantly or you were exposed to something a few times and you know I saw Star Wars in the theater when I was very young. It made a huge impression on me. I became a fan right away. There were toys, there were comics I was in. Yeah, it was a
That's, I mean, I didn't get the 77 Star Wars, but for me, that was Tim Burton's Batman. That was the Star Wars for me as a kid, just changed my life, seeing that movie on the big screen. And
yeah,
yeah, like it's,
yeah, and I don't know the weird rejection out of hand of stuff that you haven't seen. I think it's a downer.
yeah, like back in the 90s, everybody was pumped for Independence Day. No one would care about it if it came out today because they're like, what's that? Is it it's not a remake. It's what? I mean,
Well,
they made a
nobody cared
sequel
about
and
the
no one
sequel.
cared. But I mean, if it was this original summer blockbuster, like, like people aren't gonna make their ideas. Like it's just, I don't know, it's insane to me that people just have such limited taste or desire to branch out or try other things. Like I was talking recently on this show, I'm like, it's called the Brandon Peters Show because there's other things. Like I don't want to just be a horror guy or a cult movie. Like I have other things I like to talk about, like I don't have to like sit in a corner, and people love being pushed in a corner, like being the horror community. I'm just horror, horror, horror. I'm like, but when you go to want to talk about something else, and then that group's not going to want to care, and people aren't going to bring you on to talk about other things. I don't know. It's just interesting to me how people want to just limit themselves to a thing.
Yeah, and it's
Tribish,
funny.
cultish. Yeah. Like,
It's funny to me you mentioned Independence Day because this in particular I've talked about a lot. Independence Day sold itself to the masses and intrigued everybody with a Super Bowl trailer that showed them blowing up the White House.
right.
Now imagine trying to sell like, 7 years later. Um,
Yeah. Oh gosh.
yeah, that no. I mean,
Nope.
it worked contextually of
I
its
mean,
time, but
Spider-Man couldn't even sell what he was originally selling
oh my
because
God, yeah, I still feel a weird little sting in a way when I'm watching movies that set in New York and then there's just like the random shot of the towers.
hmm
It's there are a lot of Friends transitions
yeah.
that have the original
Yeah, I was there.
plaza.
I was in New York for the first time ever the year before. So I got to see them, and the next year, gone. Like it was insane.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things to tie it all back nicely is that there's a loss of context, and I think that when
hmm
I write a lot of the stuff that I write for the post, I really almost comically sometimes because I can see my own pattern. I front load it with a lot
Yeah,
of the history part of it, and it's like this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is why this is important, and this is why this had never happened before, and you know. Tony Iommi got his fingertips cut off and he invented metal.
right.
That whole thing. That it's like you gotta because
Yeah,
I think that you have when you construct the context for people, I think it does make it more welcoming for them in a way. And I think that maybe that comes from
right.
a part of my education background as a teacher for a long time as well. That the better you can set somebody up for something, the better they're gonna grasp it. And I
Mhm.
think when you're giving somebody a totally new genre that they've got no experience with, I think it's kind of understandable that some people are like, "Whoa, I don't get it." but
Right.
but they do have
You got to get them past the tweet. You got to get them past the headline, and if they read on, they'll get your context. That's
yeah
because
yeah
there's context is hard nowadays just to deliver, like even so.
oh titling anything is the biggest pain in the ass in the world. I hate
Yeah.
coming up with titles, and it's funny. Hawk of the Slayer is kind of a funny title in retrospect. Like,
hmm
what's he slay? His brother. He's not a vampire slayer. He slays bad
Voltron.
guys. Yeah, slays bad guys.
Excellent. All right. Well, we will move on to what else. This is where we just talk about something we may have taken in the past week or so, like movies, books, music, or something, or maybe something we wrote or put out in the world. So, Troy, what else?
Um, on Father's Day, we tended to do movies, and I try to get the boys who are now 16 and 14 um, get some movies in front of them that they haven't seen before. Like past highlights have included like Alien and Aliens, or
Oh, my.
the original um, introduction of Empire Strikes Back to the guys was on a Father's Day and stuff. So, um, this year I decided to go a little different because we watched kind of a lot of horror movies lately. We saw Spiral and Quiet Place 2 in the theater and whatnot. So I decided to go. So we watched the family watched The Usual Suspects,
Okay.
Major League, and Silverado. Trying to go in completely kind of different directions. It was like crime, comedy, western. Because
Yeah.
I don't necessarily do a lot of westerns, although I've watched a lot of westerns in my life. But Silverado, man, that's a movie I would recommend to anybody, because it is also a very well constructed movie. It is very classic western type with hugely appealing cast and performances. Kevin Kline is the standout for me. He's very funny in a very dry, understated way. And people are used to seeing old Kevin Costner in Yellowstone or Man of Steel will have their
Right.
minds blown by young Kevin Costner.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He,
Definitely.
he's it's like the Jim Carrey version of Kevin Costner in this movie.
Very
But
true.
for the Star Wars fans and the Raiders fans, it's written by Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote the Raiders movie on behalf of Lucas, wrote Empire, worked on the
Mhm.
new movies, etc., and co-written by him and his brother, directed by Kasdan.
Mhm.
Kasdan just a couple of years prior had directed The Big Chill, so it's got a lot of cast members in it, like Kevin Kline, and again Kevin Costner played the dead guy. Jeff Goldblum's in it.
Mhm.
Super entertaining. Um, Contextually, another cool thing. Um, I'll just push the whole thing if people aren't familiar with it. Comic companies tend to repackage their stuff a lot over time, like collections and trade paperbacks and so forth. But if you want like big chunks of stuff at a time, Marvel's Epic collections
Mhm.
are fantastic. For a long time in the 90s and so forth, they did the essentials, which were like black and white, cheap collections, like big fat ones of old issues. A lot of people weren't into it because they were black and white. Epic collections are full color and like high
Okay.
quality paper and everything, but they collect big chunks of continuity, 20 issues or so of stuff. And I've recently gotten some of those, and um they put back into print, um for the Avengers one, The Final Threat, which was the original Thanos stuff from the 70s,
Mhm.
like 13 years before the Infinity Gauntlet, the first time that the Avengers fought Thanos,
Yeah.
and you know, has Adam Warlock, Marvel, and everything. And then also I got the Under Siege one from the 80s, which has Zemo prominently. It's the where Zemo assembles a very large version of Masters of Evil, and they attack Avengers Mansion, lay siege to it, and horribly injure a bunch of Avengers, necessitating a rescue/revenge team being assembled to
Oh, wow.
save the day. And so it's a very cool storyline. But those things are um, available at your local comic shop and so forth. They have them for all the titles. I've got a couple of there's Defenders, Spider-Man, X-Men installments, just Marvel Epic Collection. They have a green and black side. I would recommend those to just about anybody, frankly.
I will say I've been enjoying not the Epic collection, but they've been doing a smart thing. I mentioned on the show probably months ago now, that because comics, we were talking about things you get in and out of with kids or get behind. Comics has been a thing with my life where I'm in and out of reading, and currently I've been into, I did the House of X, Powers of X collection. But the thing is, like
Yes.
after that starts, then they goes into the individual comics. But what they've been doing is these Dawn of X collections, which is like, here's the
Yes.
month of all the time, and I'm like, that's the most brilliant thing that they could do, rather than like, read all the six X-Men, but stuff happens in between in the little ones and you don't want to go book to book. But they're like, here you go, this is the order they published: Marauders, X-Force, X-Men, New Mutants, Fallen Angels, all that. But Excalibur isn't the other one, but like, here
Yeah.
you go, this is the issues and this is the order they released in, and I'm loving that. I just completed the 5th collection recently. But
It
that's
is
a cool idea.
it is great stuff. I opted to go in the other direction and get the individual series ones. I
Gotcha.
did get the House and Powers hardcover,
Right.
and I did get the X of Swords hardcover, because that does take the whole crossover in one
Yeah. I haven't got to
hardcover.
Exec Swords yet. So
And well, I won't say anything about that, but man, what a fun, crazy ass adventurous take on everything
oh
that they
yeah.
have done with this. I'm really enjoying it, and it's getting to the point where you get the feeling that, like, the upcoming Inferno storyline, because it's rare for them to use the same title for a story
Mhm.
twice. This Inferno storyline they're teasing, I think, you know, maybe hinting toward the end is in sight in a way for kind of this big 3 year
Yeah.
thing, similar to what Hickman did with the Avengers. But man, what a ride! It's been super
I've been really
entertaining.
enjoying going through these, and I've been since probably like late 2000s. I just kind of avoided superhero stuff because I got away from everything, and you go, you're like, I want to start from here there, but like, all you need, jump in anywhere, folks. It's good guy versus bad guy, and then maybe you'll get the details later. But I've been really, I because I read X-Men in the 90s religiously, and then you know getting older, having stuff, going to college, not having money for comics, and then when I went back to comics, I was like, I believe it was when the Buffy stuff started with Whedon doing the
Yeah,
season 8 stuff, and I was like, okay, here's my starting point. And I went there, and I got into
yeah.
Walking Dead at that time, and a lot of Kirkman stuff, and just picking up. I think Paul Dini had something that was really cool. Madame Mirage, I was reading
Oh yeah.
time, but yeah, and then I got there, and then I floated away from that. Star Wars with Marvel reset and did that, so I got into that, and then that became way too much for me to keep up with,
Yeah.
and now here I am with this, so that's where I've been with that. What?
Although
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say, those early Darth Vader and Doctor Aphra
Hmm.
stories are outstanding.
Those are
For
good.
anybody that's interested in Star Wars comics, pick those up.
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Aphra is a cool character. My what else is comic related? I just recently took in Batman: The Long Halloween Part One from the DC animated universe.
Yeah,
It's one of my like favorite Batman arcs. It's a lot of people's favorite Batman arcs,
yeah, it's
and
incredible.
was part of a backbone for the Christopher Nolan, David Goyer first two Dark Knight films, Batman Begins, Dark Knight. But this is they're really like, hey, we're gonna do this is like the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. We're doing this thing right. We're gonna do 2 parts, and
Yeah,
um, it's streamlining a little bit because you have to. It's
yeah,
a different medium. But they really made it pretty for knowing what this ends up being. It was a pretty intriguing little mystery to follow along. They got Josh Dumel is like got a really good take on Harvey Dent that I don't feel like has been seen before vocally. Maybe it's just his brashier voice.
yeah,
He's always kind of been more softer of a voice to me, like seeing Jensen Ackles, he's fine as Batman. I mean, you can just imagine
yeah,
he's fine, but freaking Jack Quaid plays the little Falcone or whatever,
Alberto Falcone.
Alberto Falcone, and he's scene stealer as that Dennis Quaid's kid.
Yeah, the
And
boys. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's the last performance of that girl from Glee that passed away. Or
Oh yeah, Naira.
yeah, she's in there, and Troy Baker is like the ultimate Mark Hamill impersonator as Joker. Like he's got that down, but it's pretty good. I mean, a lot like what I remember from the comic that's cut down a lot is a lot less Solomon Grundy stuff,
Oh yeah,
narrating over. But it's there. It's fun. I've enjoyed it. Can't wait for part 2 in August. I got sent a really cool care package for it, which came with jack-o'-lantern stencils and calendar countdown to the second part. But I really enjoyed part 1. So
yeah. One of my and this is very random, but one of my favorite things from the original Long Halloween
Mhm.
is just the scene of Scarecrow and Mad Hatter talking
Oh,
nonsense to each
yeah.
other. The
Oh,
what
yeah.
a great thing. The Long Halloween and the sequel to it, Dark Victory, are both just really
Mhm.
great Batman
And they just
comics.
know how to utilize those villains and weird, not just, I mean, just to like make a community out of this world that doesn't like villains could be there and not be like super important to everything, or like I just like the way they filter them through is pretty genius. And Nolan and Goyer were able to do
Yeah,
that with the movies as well.
I don't know if you've watched the Harley Quinn uh, animated series at all,
Oh
but
yeah.
they do a great job of the villains interacting in that too.
Oh
Just
yeah.
everything with Kite Man and
Kite Man.
they do a
Robin's
fantastic job.
hilarious in that.
Frank the Plant.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh
I
yeah,
I do love that Harley Quinn show. And I kind of like with the DC like the live action movies, and especially with Batman, like I've kind of had this desire like you're not going to be Marvel. That's fine. Just fucking do what Elseworld stuff all the time. Like I've already gotten all the Batman movies that I have wanted in my life and then some. Like
yeah,
I was fine with just Batman, Batman Returns, and Batman Forever. I could have been set for life. But then you gave me the Nolan trilogy. So I'm like, ooh, spoiled. And I'm happy with the 60s Batman and Batman the Animated Series. That's all I need ever. So start fucking with it, making it crazy. But then they're like, we're gonna make a new serious Batman movie. I'm like, we have those. Well, I'll go see it. I Batman anything I'll do. But like, I don't need it. But I would like to see you just mess around, do like Gotham by Gaslight, what they do with the animated stuff. Like, do these weird Elseworld things. Like, we could do that. We have all these Batman movies.
yeah,
You know, let the smaller characters have the serious takes and team ups and overarching stuff. Just mess around with Batman and Superman. Do it, but they won't, because not all fans
yeah.
are like me.
Right.
They're all weird.
Understanding.
See, I like
Open to new ideas.
I like Birds of Prey. It was wild, crazy, nuts. There's nothing else like it. There you go. Do it. Like I'm down with that. I'm excited for Suicide Squad because it's a James Gunn film. They're gonna let him do all that, but hey, what do I know? What do I know? So, all right. Well, that'll do it for today, Troy. Always an honor to talk shop with you and just praise
Thank
our
you.
Dark Lord together off camera. Let people know where they could follow you and keep up with your work.
Well, Saturday Evening Post, obviously, at SaturdayEveningPost.com, at Troy Brownfield on Twitter. And if you go to Twitter, or, I don't even mind people checking me out on Facebook, but I've been, I didn't mention this at the top, but I have a new blog, sort of writing hub going at
Oh yeah,
Siege of
yeah, yeah.
Troy. So check Siege of Troy out. And I've been doing kind of a mix of new articles and some quote unquote classic articles. And you'll appreciate this. The first part of the Rock Solid column, I did the 38 special
Oh
kind of
yeah, yeah.
retrospective. The second Rock Solid column is what I'm working on right now. It's actually it's taken a lot more work than I anticipated, but it's about the betrayal of Bon Jovi, how Bon Jovi turned their backs on metal. And so
1 year guitarist of Scandal, Bon Jovi, has found out
yeah,
in my
that's
last
in there.
episode.
That is in the piece. That's I definitely talk about that. But yeah, man, I tried to get into some crazy stuff, like the fact that You Give Love a Bad Name was a rewritten Bonnie Tyler song. And but yeah, just as a trailer for the bit, they were a metal band.
Yeah.
And then they had toured on Slippery and Wet, they toured on New Jersey, they were taking a break, Nirvana happened, they had a big meeting in Hawaii, and when they reemerged, they'd cut their hair, they changed their clothes, they changed everything, and they like spent the 90s as a ballad band. Always Better Roses, all this stuff. They like
Mm-hmm.
ran screaming from, they might have been like, you had Guns N' Roses and Metallica, still slugging it out there. But Bon Jovi might have been able to hold it together because they were the nucleus of this Doc McGee managed
Right.
universe that included, Skid Row and Rat and Motley Crue and everything. But they didn't. They ran. And so I talked about that. Like, these guys were a metal band. They were opening for Judas Priest. They were Rat out on tour with. They got the hell out. So I'm talking about that. That's my next big blog article.
All right. Looking forward to it. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Brand4KUHD. We're in work at whysoblu.com. There's more from the Brandon Peters Show this week. But until then, always remember to keep the positivity in your online film chatter.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios, and no infringement is intended. Additional information on this and other episodes at BrandonPetersShow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail at BrandonPetersShow.com. The show is available on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.